December 5th, 1945. A routine training mission. 5 torpedo bombers. 14 men. A clear afternoon. What should have been a simple 3-hour exercise would become one of aviation's greatest mysteries. This is the story of Flight 19. 5 planes that took off from Florida and simply vanished. Not a single piece of wreckage. No bodies. No oil slicks. No answers. Only questions that have haunted investigators for nearly 80 years. The world had just emerged from the shadow of World War II. Victory had been declared mere months earlier, and America was transitioning back to peacetime operations. Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida, was buzzing with activity as experienced combat veterans returned to training exercises, preparing the next generation of naval aviators. The sense of normalcy made what was about to happen all the more shocking. These weren't raw recruits on their first flight. These were skilled pilots who had survived the war, flying reliable aircraft on a well-established route. The disappearance would defy logic, spawn countless theories, and give birth to one of the most enduring legends in aviation history, the Bermuda Triangle. The case of Flight 19 stands apart from other aviation disasters for several chilling reasons. There was no distress call indicating mechanical failure. No wreckage was ever recovered, despite one of the most extensive searches in naval history, covering over 300,000 square miles. But perhaps most disturbing of all, the rescue plane sent to find them also vanished, taking 13 more lives with it and bringing the total missing to 27 men and 6 aircraft. The mystery deepens with the haunting final radio transmissions. We are completely lost. Everything looks strange, even the ocean. It looks like we are entering white water. These weren't the words of panicked rookies, but of experienced military aviators who somehow couldn't determine where they were despite clear skies at takeoff. The men of Flight 19, Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, was the flight leader of this fateful mission. At 28 years old, Taylor was no novice. He had accumulated approximately 2,500 flying hours with extensive experience in TBM Avengers. A combat veteran of the Pacific Theater during World War II, Taylor had proven his mettle in the most dangerous of circumstances. However, there was one crucial detail. He was relatively new to the Florida area and unfamiliar with the geography of the region. Taylor had a known history of navigation difficulties. During his time in the Pacific, he had gotten lost on multiple occasions, twice being forced to ditch his aircraft in the water and await rescue. Despite these incidents, his combat record was exemplary, and he held no black marks with the Navy. The other pilots and crew members were a mix of experienced officers and trainees. Captain Edward Joseph Powers, USMC, FT-36, pilot with crew members Staff Sergeant Howell Orrin Thompson and Sergeant George Richard Payanessa. Ensign Joseph T. Bossy, USNR, FT-3, with crew members Herman A. Thielander and Bert E. Ballack Jr. Captain George W. Stivers, USMC, FT-117, with crew members Private Robert P. Grubel and Sergeant Robert F. Gallivan, Second Lieutenant Forrest J. Gerber, USMCR, FT-81, with crew member Private First Class William E. Lightfoot. Each trainee pilot had completed approximately 300 hours of flight time, with about 60 hours, specifically in Avenger aircraft. These were not beginners. They were advanced students on the cusp of completing their training. Taylor's crew in FT-28 included gunner George Francis Devlin and radioman Walter Reed Parpart Jr. One crew member, Corporal Alan Cosner, had asked to be excused from the exercise. His decision would save his life. The Grumman TBM Avenger was one of the most reliable and rugged torpedo bombers in the United States Navy arsenal. First seeing action at the Battle of Midway in 1942, the Avenger had proven itself as an outstanding combat aircraft throughout World War II. Technical specifications painted a picture of a formidable machine. Crew, 3. Pilot, radio man, and gunner. Length, 40 feet, 11.5 inches. Wingspan, 54 feet, 2 inches. Power plant, Wright R2600-20 twin cyclone radial engine, producing 1,900 horsepower. Maximum speed, 275 miles per hour. Cruise speed, 145 miles per hour. Range, 1,000 miles. Service ceiling, 30,100 feet. Fuel capacity, 330 gallons in center section tanks, plus auxiliary tanks. The Avengers were nicknamed Iron Birds for their remarkable durability and ability to sustain damage. One of their most important safety features was their ability to stay afloat on water for a considerable time if forced to ditch, giving crews a fighting chance at survival. The aircraft carried extensive radio equipment that filled much of the greenhouse canopy behind the pilot, ensuring multiple means of communication. These weren't experimental or temperamental machines. They were proven, battle-tested aircraft that had brought countless crews home safely from the most dangerous missions of the war. The mission plan, navigation problem number 1. The training exercise, designated as navigation problem number 1, was a routine triangular route that had been flown countless times before. The mission plan was straightforward and well documented. Phase 1. Depart NAS Fort Lauderdale and fly east into the Atlantic Ocean toward Hens and Chicken Shoals in the Bahamas, approximately 56 miles away. Phase 2. Conduct practice bombing runs on the shoals, dropping dummy bombs on a derelict target vessel. Phase 3. Continue east for an additional leg, then turn north. Phase 4. Fly north over Grand Bahama Island. Phase 5. Turn southwest and return to NAS Fort Lauderdale. The entire exercise was expected to take approximately 3 hours, with the aircraft returning well before sunset. With 330 gallons of fuel providing roughly 4 hours of flight time, there was a comfortable safety margin built into the mission. The morning of December 5th, 1945, dawned with favorable weather conditions. The skies were clear, visibility was good, and there were no weather warnings that would have raised concerns about the mission. During pre-flight checks, it was discovered that none of the aircraft had functioning clocks. However, this was not considered cause for concern, as it was standard practice to rely on the radio tower for time coordination, and the mission was scheduled to be brief enough that precise timekeeping wasn't critical. All 5 TBM Avengers were fully fueled and had passed their maintenance inspections. The aircraft were in excellent mechanical condition. These were well-maintained machines from a training squadron that took safety seriously. At 2:10 p.m., the 5 Avengers of Flight 19 roared down the runway and lifted into the clear Florida sky. Everything appeared routine. Everything appeared normal. Within hours, all 5 would be gone. The flight. The disappearance. Takeoff and initial flight. The exact time of takeoff was 2:10 p.m. on December 5th, 1945. The 5 TBM Avengers formed up smoothly and headed east over the Atlantic Ocean, their engines humming reliably as they made their way toward the Bahamas. Initial radio communications confirmed that all systems were functioning normally, and the weather remained favorable. The flight reached Hens and Chickens Shoals without incident. The pilots executed their practice bombing runs successfully, dropping their dummy ordnance on the target. For the first 90 minutes, everything proceeded exactly according to plan. This was routine training at its finest, experienced instructors guiding their students through a well-worn exercise. But as the group began to turn north for the second leg of their journey, something went wrong. First signs of trouble. At approximately 3:45 p.m., 1545 hours military time, Fort Lauderdale's flight tower received an unexpected and troubling message from Lieutenant Taylor. His voice sounded confused and worried, a dramatic shift from the confident communications earlier in the flight. "Cannot see land," Taylor reported. "We seem to be off course." The tower responded immediately. "What is your position?" Silence. Tower personnel peered out into the clear afternoon, in the direction where the planes were supposed to be operating, but there was no sign of them. Then Taylor's voice came back. "We cannot be sure where we are. Repeat, cannot see land." At approximately 4 p.m., 1600 hours, radio operators intercepted a conversation between Taylor and one of his student pilots. The exchange was alarming. Student pilot: "I don't know where we are. We must have gotten lost after that last turn." Taylor: "Both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." This was the crucial error that would seal their fate. Taylor believed he was over the Florida Keys, far to the south of Fort Lauderdale, when, in reality, the broken land he was seeing was the Bahamas, exactly where he should have been. If he was over the Keys, flying northeast would take him back to Florida, but flying northeast from the Bahamas would take him farther out into the Atlantic Ocean. The radio communications. The transcript of Flight 19's radio communications reveals a growing sense of confusion and desperation. Contact was intermittent, sometimes lost for 10 minutes or more, then resuming with increasingly frantic transmissions. After a period of silence, a different voice came through, no longer Taylor's. "We can't find west. Everything is wrong. We can't be sure of any direction. Everything looks strange. Even the ocean, for reasons never fully explained." Taylor had turned over command to another pilot. Then, inexplicably, he took command back. By this point, other pilots in the flight were expressing their own theories about their location. Around 4:56 p.m., 1656 hours, someone in the flight was heard saying, "Damn it, if we could just fly west, we would get home. Head west, damn it." It was a plea that went unheeded. Military discipline meant the student pilots would not contradict their commanding officer, even if they believed he was leading them to their doom. Taylor changed course multiple times, first ordering the flight to head east for 10 minutes, then reconsidering and ordering them to fly due west, 270 degrees, But by this time, the weather had begun to deteriorate. Rain squalls moved into the area, and the sun was setting. Several land-based radio stations managed to triangulate Flight 19's position. Point. By 5:50 p.m., 1750 hours, they determined the flight was within a 100-mile radius of 29 degrees north, 79 degrees west, north of the Bahamas, and well off the coast of Central Florida. The planes were more than 200 miles out to sea. The information never reached Taylor in time. The final messages. At 6:04 p.m., 1804 hours, Taylor's voice was heard again. Holding 270. We didn't fly far enough east. We may as well just turn around and fly east again. It was another tragic miscalculation. By turning back east, he was heading even farther out into the Atlantic. The sun had set. Darkness enveloped the ocean. The weather had worsened considerably, with rough seas and limited visibility. The last message from Flight 19 was received at approximately 6:20 p.m., 1820 hours, though some reports indicate it may have been as late as 7:04 p.m. Taylor's voice, steady despite the circumstances, delivered the final words ever heard from the 14 men. All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. Then, silence. Flight 19 vanished into the gathering darkness. The search operation. Initial response. As the radio transmissions from Flight 19 became increasingly desperate, personnel at NAS Fort Lauderdale sprang into action. Multiple air bases, aircraft, and merchant ships in the area were alerted to the developing emergency. The tower had been tracking the situation for hours, and it was becoming clear that 5 aircraft with 14 men aboard were in serious trouble. A PBY Catalina search plane was dispatched after 6 p.m., 1800 hours, to try to locate Flight 19 and guide them back, if possible. As darkness fell and the weather continued to deteriorate, the search effort intensified. The PBM Mariner rescue plane, 2 PBM Mariner flying boats, originally scheduled for their own training flights, were diverted to perform square pattern searches in the area west of Flight 19's last known position. These massive seaplanes were ideal for search and rescue operations, equipped with long-range capabilities and the ability to land on WA. Lieutenant Walter G. Jeffrey, USN, pilot. Lieutenant Harry G. Cohn, USNR. Ensign Roger M. Allen, USN. Ensign Lloyd A. Eliason, USN. Ensign Charles D. Arsenault, USN. Robert C. Cameron, RN3, USN. Wiley D. Cargill Sr., Seaman 1st, USN. James F. Jordan, ARM3, USN. John T. Menendez, AOM3, USN. Philip B. Neiman, Seaman 1st, USN. James F. Osterheld, AOM3, USN. Donald E. Peterson, AMM1, USN. Alfred J. Zawicki, Seaman 1st, USN. The Mariner called in a routine radio message at 7:30 p.m., 1930 hours, reporting they were nearing Flight 19's last assumed position. The weather in the search area was deteriorating. Overcast skies, rain showers, turbulence, 25 to 30 knot winds, and very rough seas. The second disappearance At 7:50 p.m., 1950 hours, the SS Gaines Mills, a tanker ship, reported witnessing something horrifying. A mid-air explosion. Crew members saw flames leaping 100 to 120 feet high, burning on the surface of the sea for approximately 10 minutes. The position was 28.59 degree N, 80.25 degree west, off the coast near New Smyrna Beach. Captain Shauna Stanley ordered the Gaines Mills to search the burning, oily sea for survivors, but found none. The escort carrier USS Solomons corroborated the account. They had been tracking an aircraft on radar at the exact position where the explosion occurred. The aircraft vanished from their screen at the moment of the explosion. Training 49, the PBM Mariner sent to rescue Flight 19, was never heard from again. 13 more men were gone. PBM Mariners had a troublesome reputation for fuel system leaks and were sometimes nicknamed flying gas tanks by their crews due to their tendency to develop vapor fumes. The Navy would later conclude that a faulty fuel system resulted in the catastrophic mid-air explosion. The Navy would later conclude that a faulty fuel system resulted in the catastrophic mid-air explosion. The massive search operation. At daybreak on December 6, 1945, the Navy launched one of the largest air and sea search operations in history. The scale was unprecedented. They were now searching for 6 aircraft and 27 missing men. The search effort included hundreds of aircraft from the Navy, Army, and Coast Guard, dozens of ships combing the waters, a search area exceeding 300,000 square miles of Atlantic Ocean and Gulf of Mexico waters. Operations continuing for 5 full days. Lieutenant Dave White, a senior flight instructor at NAS Fort Lauderdale, remembered being awakened early. It was the duty officer, and he said all flight instructors were due at the hangar at 5 a.m. because 5 planes were missing. For 3 days, White and his students flew up and down the Florida coast at low altitudes, desperately searching. They found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no life rafts, no bodies. Not a single trace of Flight 19 or the men who flew those missions. The ocean had swallowed them whole. The investigation, the official Navy report. In the months following the disappearance, the Navy convened a board of investigation that produced a comprehensive 500-page report examining every aspect of the incident. The investigation was thorough, interviewing witnesses, analyzing radio transcripts, examining weather reports, and reviewing the maintenance records of all aircraft involved. The board's initial findings were stark and placed responsibility squarely on Lieutenant Taylor. Key conclusions. Taylor had mistakenly believed the small islands he passed over were the Florida Keys, convincing himself that his flight was over the Gulf of Mexico and that heading northeast would take them to Florida. The investigation determined that Taylor had actually passed over the Bahamas as scheduled, exactly where he should have been, according to the mission plan. Taylor's misidentification of his location caused him to guide Flight 19 farther northeast and out to sea, away from land and safety. Taylor refused to change the radio frequency from the training frequency to the search and rescue frequency, hampering communication efforts. The training frequency was plagued by interference from Cuban radio stations and carrier wave issues. The report noted that some subordinate officers likely knew their approximate position, as indicated by radio transmissions stating that flying west would result in reaching the mainland. The compasses were determined to have malfunctioned, which was considered a mitigating factor. The initial report placed blame for the loss directly on Lieutenant Taylor, finding him responsible for the deaths of 14 men and the loss of 5 aircraft. Key evidence examined. The investigators compiled and analyzed multiple forms of evidence. Radio transmission transcripts. Every recovered communication from Flight 19 was transcribed and analyzed. The transcripts revealed Taylor's growing confusion, his belief that he was over the Florida Keys, and his decisions to fly northeast and then east, both directions that took the flight away from land. Weather reports. Initial weather conditions were favorable, clear skies and good visibility at takeoff. However, conditions deteriorated throughout the afternoon and evening, with rain, wind, and rough seas developing in the search area by nightfall. Maintenance records. All 5 TBM Avengers had been properly maintained and were in excellent mechanical condition. There was no evidence of mechanical failure prior to takeoff. Pilot experience and training. The investigation examined Taylor's 2,500 hours of flight experience, his combat record, and his history of navigation difficulties. They also reviewed the training records of the student pilots, all of whom had approximately 300 total flight hours, with 60 hours in Avengers. Fuel calculations. With 330 gallons of fuel and a flight time of approximately 4 hours, the investigation concluded that Flight 19 had exhausted its fuel supply while far out at sea. Once the aircraft ran out of fuel, they would have been forced to ditch in darkness in rough ocean conditions. Contradictions and questions. Despite the thoroughness of the investigation, significant questions remained unanswered. Why was no debris ever found? The TBM Avenger was designed to float for a considerable time after ditching. With 5 aircraft going down in relatively close proximity, there should have been some recoverable wreckage, life rafts, fuel slicks, debris, something. The complete absence of any physical evidence was deeply troubling. Why did all compasses fail simultaneously? Taylor reported that both of his compasses were malfunctioning. While compass issues were known to occur in the area due to magnetic variations, the simultaneous failure of multiple compass systems across the flight was unusual. Why didn't the student pilots override Taylor's commands? Radio transmissions indicated that at least some of the other pilots believed they should fly west to reach land. The answer lay in military discipline. Subordinates did not contradict their commanding officer, even in life or death situations. What exactly were the white water conditions Taylor described? His final transmissions mentioned entering white water, and that everything looks strange, even the ocean. Some have interpreted this as rough seas, while others have suggested more mysterious explanations. The family's response. The official findings devastated the families of the missing men, particularly Catherine Taylor, Lieutenant Charles Taylor's mother. She was outraged that the Navy had assigned blame to her son when there were no bodies and no aircraft wreckage as concrete evidence. Mrs. Taylor mounted her own investigation and filed an appeal with the Board for Correction of Naval Records. She argued that without physical evidence, The Navy's conclusions were speculative and unfairly tarnished her son's reputation and service record. Her efforts were ultimately successful. In 1947, the Board for Correction of Naval Records reconsidered the case and amended the official report. The cause of the loss of Flight 19 was changed from pilot error to cause unknown. Lieutenant Taylor was exonerated of responsibility for the loss of lives and naval aircraft. The families never received the closure they deserved. With no bodies to bury and no wreckage to examine, they were left with only memories and unanswered questions. Annual commemorations would later be held to honor the 27 men who vanished that day. Theories and explanations. Natural explanations. 1. Human error and navigation failure. The most widely accepted explanation centers on a cascade of navigational errors compounded by environmental factors and human psychology. Taylor's critical mistake. The evidence strongly suggests that when Taylor saw the broken land of the Bahamas, he misidentified it as the Florida Keys. This single error set in motion a series of decisions that led Flight 19 farther out to sea rather than towards safety. Spatial disorientation. Experienced pilots are not immune to spatial disorientation, especially when flying over water with limited visual references. The phenomenon of get-homeitis, the psychological pressure to return to base, can cause pilots to make poor decisions under stress. The compass issue. While Taylor reported compass malfunctions, investigators noted that it's more likely the compasses were working correctly, but he didn't trust their readings because they contradicted his belief about his position. This is a documented psychological phenomenon where pilots ignore instruments in favor of their instincts. Why this theory is most credible. Taylor had a documented history of getting lost, having done so multiple times during World War II and being forced to ditch twice in the Pacific. He was unfamiliar with Florida geography. The radio transcripts clearly show his confusion and his certainty that he was over the Keys when he wasn't. Had Flight 19 actually been where Taylor believed, they would have reached the Florida coastline within 10 to 20 minutes of turning west. Weather conditions. While the flight began in clear conditions, weather played a crucial role in the tragedy. Rapid deterioration. By late afternoon, conditions had worsened significantly. Rain, wind, rough seas, and limited visibility made navigation increasingly difficult and dangerous. The Bermuda Triangle's volatile weather. The region is known for sudden and severe weather changes. The Gulf Stream creates unpredictable conditions, and the area where Flight 19 disappeared is prone to violent weather systems. Impact on ditching. Even if the pilots had successfully ditched their aircraft, hitting rough seas at high speed would be catastrophic. Lieutenant Dave White, who participated in the search, stated, "I don't think anybody got out of their planes at all. I don't think anybody survived. Hitting the ocean at high speed is like hitting a brick wall." Mechanical failure. While less likely, given the maintenance records, mechanical issues cannot be entirely ruled out. Fuel exhaustion. The most certain mechanical factor was fuel exhaustion. With approximately 4 hours of fuel and more than 4 hours of flight time, much of it heading in the wrong direction, the aircraft simply ran out of gas, far from land. Multiple simultaneous failures. For this theory to explain the disappearance, all 5 aircraft would need to have experienced similar catastrophic failures simultaneously. The probability of this is extremely low. Ditching characteristics. While Avengers were designed to float, ditching in darkness, in rough seas, would likely result in the aircraft breaking apart and sinking quickly, potentially explaining the lack of wreckage. Magnetic anomalies. The Bermuda Triangle area has documented magnetic variations that can affect compass readings. Scientific basis. The area is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align. This can cause confusion for pilots relying on magnetic compasses if they're not aware of the variation. The compass malfunction. Taylor's report that his compasses were malfunctioning could have been his interpretation of unusual readings caused by magnetic anomalies. However, experienced pilots should be trained to recognize and compensate for such variations. NOAA's position. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration notes that magnetic compass anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle may cause a magnetic compass to point to true north instead of magnetic north, causing confusion in wayfinding. However, NOAA also states that the U.S. Navy and U.S. Coast Guard contend that there are no supernatural explanations for disasters at sea. Supernatural and extraterrestrial theories. While lacking scientific evidence, these theories have captured public imagination and become integral to the Bermuda Triangle legend. 1. The Bermuda Triangle phenomenon. Flight 19 became the cornerstone of the Bermuda Triangle legend, a mysterious region of the Atlantic Ocean where ships and aircraft allegedly disappear under inexplicable circumstances. Origins of the legend. The term Bermuda Triangle wasn't popularized until the 1960s and 1970s, but Flight 19's disappearance provided the most compelling evidence for the legend. Other disappearances? Proponents point to numerous other vessels and aircraft that have vanished in the region, suggesting a pattern of mysterious activity. Scientific skepticism. Researchers have thoroughly debunked the Bermuda Triangle as a uniquely dangerous area. Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki, an Australian scientist, has repeatedly stated that the number that go missing in the Bermuda Triangle is the same as anywhere in the world on a percentage basis. Lloyd's of London, the famous insurance company, has held this position since the 1970s and does not charge higher premiums for vessels crossing the region. 2. Alien abduction. UFO enthusiasts have long speculated that Flight 19 was abducted by extraterrestrials. The Flying to Mars claim. Some proponents claim the Navy Board of Inquiry stated the planes flew off to Mars. This quote has never been verified in official documents and appears to be apocryphal. The Whitewater Statement. Taylor's description of entering white water and that the water is green, not white, has been interpreted by some as evidence of encountering an alien phenomenon. Why this theory doesn't hold up. Taylor was 50 kilometers off course and had a documented history of getting lost. The whitewater description most likely referred to rough seas with white caps. There is no physical evidence supporting extraterrestrial involvement. 3. Time warp or dimensional portal. Some theorists propose that the Bermuda Triangle contains a portal to another dimension or time period. The speculation. This theory attempts to explain why no wreckage was ever found. The aircraft didn't crash, but were transported elsewhere. Popular culture influence. This explanation has been popularized by science fiction and speculative television shows, but has no basis in physics or observable reality. Atlantean technology. Fringe theories connect the disappearances to advanced technology from the lost city of Atlantis, supposedly located beneath the Atlantic Ocean. The claim. Proponents suggest that ancient, still-functioning technology on the seafloor interferes with modern navigation and propulsion systems. Scientific reality. There is no archaeological or scientific evidence for the existence of Atlantis, let alone functioning ancient technology capable of downing aircraft. Conspiracy theories. 1. Military cover-up. Some believe the Navy deliberately concealed information about Flight 19. The argument. The Navy's initial finding of pilot error, followed by the amendment to cause unknown, has fueled speculation that they're hiding something. The complete absence of wreckage, despite an exhaustive search, seems suspicious to conspiracy theorists. Counterargument. The amendment to cause unknown is fully explained by Catherine Taylor's successful appeal and the legitimate criticism that without physical evidence, assigning definitive blame was inappropriate. Military secrecy in 1945 was common due to ongoing Cold War concerns, but there's no evidence of a cover-up specific to Flight 19. Secret mission. Another theory suggests Flight 19 was on an unauthorized or classified mission rather than a routine training exercise. The speculation. What if the bombing practice was a cover story for something else? What if Taylor knew exactly where he was going? The reality? All evidence points to a routine training exercise. The student pilots aboard were trainees, not special operations personnel. The mission plan was standard and documented. Friendly fire or accidental shoot-down. Could Flight 19 have been accidentally shot down by U.S. forces and the incident covered up? The theory. Perhaps a gunnery exercise went wrong, or the planes were mistaken for an enemy threat in the post-war confusion. Why this is unlikely? There were no reports of military exercises in the area that could have resulted in friendly fire. The PBM Mariner's explosion was witnessed by civilian ships and appears to have been a fuel system failure, not combat damage. If Flight 19 had been shot down, wreckage would have been found in the search area. Legacy and cultural impact. Media coverage. The disappearance of Flight 19 captured national attention immediately. On December 7th, 1945, exactly 4 years after Pearl Harbor, the New York Times published a report on the loss, though it appeared at the bottom of the page as the nation was still focused on post-war reconstruction. Over the following decades, media coverage intensified. Luridly titled books, articles, and movies have posited strange magnetic disturbances, whirlpools, sea monsters, and aliens as explanations. The mystery has been the subject of numerous documentaries examining the evidence and exploring theories, books analyzing the incident from historical, scientific, and speculative perspectives, television shows featuring Flight 19 as a centerpiece of Bermuda Triangle investigations, movies incorporating elements of the story into fictional narratives. The 1982 article in Flight magazine, titled The Lost Patrol, cemented the incident's place in aviation lore. The Bermuda Triangle legend. Flight 19's disappearance became the foundational story of the Bermuda Triangle mythology. Before 1945, there was no widespread belief in a cursed region of the Atlantic. The loss of 5 aircraft and their rescue plane, with 0 physical evidence recovered, provided the perfect mystery to build a legend upon. Other famous disappearances in the region: USS Cyclops, 1918, a Navy cargo ship with 309 crew members that vanished without a trace. Star Tiger and Star Ariel, 1948 to 1949, 2 British passenger aircraft. DC-3 NC-1602, 1948, disappeared with 32 people aboard. Various private aircraft and pleasure boats over subsequent decades. The scientific community's response. Researchers and scientists have consistently challenged the Bermuda Triangle legend. The U.S. Coast Guard has stated that the combined forces of nature and human fallibility outdo even the most incredulous science fiction, and that statistical analysis shows no higher rate of disappearances in the region than anywhere else in the world. NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, maintains that environmental factors, the Gulf Stream's violent weather changes, the complicated navigation around Caribbean islands, and magnetic variations can explain most disappearances without resort to supernatural explanations. Memorials and remembrance. The Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale Museum maintains exhibits honoring the men of Flight 19 and continues to research the incident. A memorial at the former Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, now Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, commemorates the 14 men who took off that December afternoon and never returned. Annual commemorations bring together family members, historians, and aviation enthusiasts to remember the lost crews. For many families, these events provide a connection to loved ones who have no graves, no final resting place known to their descendants. Andy Morocco, an aviation historian and founder of AeroQuest.org, has dedicated years to solving mysteries related to Flight 19. His most ambitious project, Project Mariner, involves searching for the wreckage of the PBM-5 Mariner, Training 49, that disappeared while searching for Flight 19. Using side-scan sonar, Morocco and his volunteer team have conducted expeditions to map the seafloor at the last known location of the rescue plane. Influence on popular culture. The mystery of Flight 19 has permeated popular culture in countless ways. Aviation safety and training. The incident led to improved navigation training, better emergency procedures, and enhanced radio communication protocols. Modern naval aviators study Flight 19 as a cautionary tale about the dangers of spatial disorientation and the importance of trusting instruments over instinct. Books and films. The story has inspired numerous fictional works, including movies that blend the historical facts with speculative elements. The phrase Flight 19 has become shorthand for mysterious disappearances. Public fascination. The mystery continues to captivate new generations. Why does Flight 19 still fascinate us nearly 80 years later? Perhaps because it represents the limits of human knowledge and control. These were skilled military aviators in reliable aircraft on a clear day, yet they vanished completely. It reminds us that despite our technology and expertise, the ocean keeps its secrets. Conclusion: the enduring mystery. On December 5, 1945, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale on what should have been a routine 3-hour training exercise. 14 men, pilots, radio men, and gunners, expected to be home for dinner. They never arrived. The rescue plane sent to find them, a PBM Mariner with 13 crew members, exploded in midair and vanished into the same waters. Despite one of the largest search operations in history, covering over 300,000 square miles and lasting 5 days, not a single piece of wreckage, not one body, not even an oil slick was ever recovered. The questions remain. How do 5 large aircraft disappear without a trace? Why couldn't experienced pilots, with multiple compasses, determine which direction was west? What happened in those final moments before Flight 19 went silent forever? The most likely explanation, after examining decades of evidence, investigations, and theories, the most plausible explanation remains the simplest: a tragic combination of human error, environmental factors, and misfortune. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced combat pilot, but one unfamiliar with Florida geography and with a history of navigation difficulties, misidentified the Bahamas as the Florida Keys. This fundamental error led him to make a series of decisions that took Flight 19 farther out into the Atlantic Ocean instead of toward the safety of land. When he finally realized his mistake, it was too late. The aircraft had exhausted their fuel far from shore. As darkness fell and weather conditions deteriorated, the 5 Avengers were forced to ditch in rough seas. Hitting the water at speed in darkness would have been catastrophic. The aircraft likely broke apart on impact, and the crews, strapped into their positions, would have had little chance of survival. Wreckage sank in deep Atlantic waters, where ocean currents could have dispersed debris over hundreds of miles. The PBM Mariner rescue plane, known for fuel system problems, likely suffered a mechanical failure that led to the explosion witnessed by the SS Gaines Mills. This explanation requires no supernatural forces, no conspiracies, no aliens. It simply acknowledges the harsh truth that even experienced aviators in reliable aircraft can make fatal errors. It's a reminder that navigation over featureless ocean is challenging, that spatial disorientation can affect anyone, and that the sea is unforgiving of mistakes. Remembering the 27. Beyond the theories and speculation, we must remember that Flight 19 was not just an aviation mystery. It was a human tragedy. 27 men lost their lives on December 5, 1945. The 14 men of Flight 19, Charles C. Taylor, George Devlin, Walter R. Parpart, E.J. Powers, Howell O. Thompson, George R. Pawanessa, Joseph T. Bossy, Herman A. Thielander, Bert E. Ballack Jr., George W. Stivers, Robert P. Grubel, Robert F. Gallivan, Forrest J. Gerber, and William E. Lightfoot. The 13 men of Training 49, Walter G. Jeffrey, Harry G. Cohn, Roger M. Allen, Lloyd A. Eliason, Charles D. Arsenault, Robert C. Cameron, Wiley D. Cargill Sr., James F. Jordan, John T. Menendez, Philip B. Neiman, James F. Osterheld, Donald E. Peterson, and Alfred J. Zawicki. They left behind wives, children, parents, and siblings who spent the rest of their lives wondering what happened in those final moments. What Flight 19 teaches us. The mystery of Flight 19 teaches us several enduring lessons about aviation, exploration, and human nature. Trust your instruments. When Taylor's compasses told him one thing, but his instincts told him another, he chose to trust his instincts. Modern aviation training emphasizes instrument reliance for precisely this reason. Question authority when lives are at stake. The student pilots who believed they should fly west remained silent due to military discipline. Today's aviation culture emphasizes that any crew member has the responsibility to speak up when safety is compromised. The ocean demands respect. The sea is vast, deep, and powerful. It can swallow aircraft whole and hide all evidence. Modern search and rescue capabilities are far superior to those available in 1945. But even today, aircraft that crash into deep ocean waters can take years to locate. Mystery attracts myth. In the absence of concrete answers, human imagination fills the void. The supernatural theories surrounding Flight 19 say more about our need for extraordinary explanations than about what actually happened. The search for answers continues. Perhaps one day, advancing underwater search technology will locate the wreckage of Flight 19 or Training 49. Perhaps physical evidence will finally provide the closure that investigators, historians, and families have sought for nearly 80 years. Until then, Flight 19 remains one of aviation's greatest mysteries, a sobering reminder of the day 5 planes and 27 men vanished into thin air, leaving only questions behind.